We are back for another edition of the Fight HQ preview. This time we're here for UFC Charlotte. We appreciate everyone tuning in here to our show here this week. And me and Pete have been sitting here for about 30 minutes. We got to make sure Pete's audio is all good. We are all good on that front, Pete.
Yes, sir. Thank goodness. And thank you guys so much for your understanding last week and bearing with us. We still had a large turnout. A lot of you guys still found ways to listen to the show, put it on 2x speed, whatever you did. Talk to us through Discord. We really appreciate it. And it was a really successful week for everybody, a part of our community.
Yeah, man. I was at a college graduation last week, and so I'm kind of like I'm monitoring. Then once, unfortunately, like even though I knew it was total boom bust play last week, Pete, on Braxton Smith, I was like, and then I'm following on Twitter, and I'm like seeing the tweets of, well, he's gassed out 75 seconds into the fight. I'm like, oh man, this ain't gonna be good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't regret it because it's just like heavyweight MMA. And thankfully I had plenty of Frivola to kind of climb me back up the rankings. And that's where a ton of chalk of everybody getting to Drew Dober, thinking that he was just a clear round 1 KO finish at that price point. And that was a great fight. And, Frivola ended up, capitalizing on Drew Dober, dropping his hands. So, when you are wrong on one fight, doesn't mean you're done. And when a ton of that chalk failed with Drew Dober, I climbed the ranks because of my exposure to Frivola, and super thankful for that. But all in all, it was a great week.
Yeah, give a congratulations to 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐵, who took down first place in the Fight HQ contest last week, and he had a losing fighter in his lineup. That was Henry Cejudo. The rest of his lineup, Yeon, 𝐉𝐿𝐿𝐵, Jourdain, Frivola, and 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐵. Matt Frivola, man, that was one of the ones that I just did not see coming. Got to give a lot of kudos to him. I was listening to Ray Longo talking about Frivola earlier this week, and kind of talking about really how they've turned things around since that 7-second knockout to Terrence McKinney, what he did there. Of course, if you want to join the Fight HQ contest for this week, it is in the description below. If you haven't watched us on YouTube, we appreciate it. Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. That does truly help us out a lot. Of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Of course, if you're listening to us on the podcasting platforms after the fact, rate, review, subscribe, all of that. And, Pete, as we move ahead to UFC Charlotte, we'll talk a little game theory here. We're doing some fights.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way to put it, right? Like it's the cards start to go downhill from a pay-per-view, and the pay-per-view last week I didn't necessarily think it was pay-per-view quality. I thought it was solid. But I don't know. I mean, just the quality of cards, there's more cards, so there's going to be some stinkers in there, some surprise fights. But yeah, I mean there's some intriguing names on the card, but for the most part, not the most notorious names throughout.
Yeah, as I was kind of, going through the salaries over the past day or so, I mean, the one thing that I think really stuck out to me, and you were talking about this before the show, is that finding underdogs this week. That is going to be the tough thing. I mean, you can look at some of these 9,000 options and look at the fantasy score upside they have. I mean, the two that stick out to you are both heavyweights of Jailton Almeida, and the other one being Karl Williams. And obviously this is a card where I'm really looking at ownership, and I want to see kind of how ownership's going right now. Cody Stamann's got the leverage. I don't know how long that's going to last, but he's the one guy that I look at he's going to be, if this ownership sticks what he's sticking at, of course, if you want to take advantage of the ownership, click that link there below to take advantage of that offer we have for you. But Cody Stamann, to me, is the one that sticks out the most, and it's just primarily an ownership play, and with the asterisk saying that he does utilize wrestling.
Yeah, I want to see the update in ownership, and I'm pretty disappointed that we lost my underdog of the week in Pete Rodriguez. It was at that really cheap price point where I was able to get to a lot of fighters, and I liked his KO upside over a guy in Natan Levy who has good takedowns, great head kicks, but kind of underwhelms in almost all of his fights. So I was hoping that we were going to get a 7,100 fighter coming through for us. Now we have to kind of navigate throughout, and as you mentioned, the underdogs, I'm not in love with a lot of them. There's two of them that I am planting my flag on as who I do think get victories. Outside of that, I think it's going to be some mixing and matching and making sure I'm sprinkling certain exposures and getting to fighters that I don't even really feel comfortable about, but more so based on the volatility within their division, the volatility within accepting fights on short notice and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, in the mid range is often overlooked. And when you can take advantage of a situation where everybody's either going high and low, stars and scrubs approach, you can get to an 8,500 Cody Stamann who has some sneaky upside despite his lackluster track record. So we'll see. I'll get to him plenty, but can't wait to break down these matchups with you.
Yeah, I mean, roster building is going to be an interesting one this week. I mean, we're going to, when we talk about the Ian Garry and Daniel Rodriguez fight, I'm going to explain kind of the differences to me in that fight. We're talking GPP versus cash. I mean, I don't even know if that fight's going to be a GPP fight this week just because of how I see this one going down. But let's get right into our main event heavyweight matchup here. We got Jailton Almeida taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Jailton Almeida is a 5-1 betting favorite in this one, plus 375 for Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And of course, looking at the DFS side of the equation, 9,600 for Almeida on DK, 6,600 for Rozenstruik, 23-12 over there on FanDuel. I mean, Pete, look, we all know the hype that is out there for Jailton Almeida, and it is all warranted. I mean, this guy has, I think, ceiling is UFC champion, but man, this is a big price tag we got to pay.
Massive price tag, but I think it's completely warranted against the guy in Jairzinho Rozenstruik who can defend takedowns, but when he's taken down, it looks ugly. Jailton Almeida, his strength of schedule thus far, wins over Danilo Marquez, Parker Porter, Anton Tocali, and Shamil Abdurakhimov, all finishes inside of 2 rounds. So extremely impressive, but those names are not the same type of names, not the same type of level of fighter that Jairzinho Rozenstruik is. Rozenstruik can actually make people a little gun-shy because of his KO ability. We've seen him knock people down with a jab. We've seen that happen against Alan Crowder. Certain fighters run into shots, and it literally takes a glancing shot from Jairzinho Rozenstruik to pick up a victory, wobble you on the feet. If for some reason he's able to defend some takedowns and not get ground and pounded out or submitted, I think that there is some interest as a complete dart throw for Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Like if I'm in a 20 max, I'm going to get to him just because I don't think many people are. But the style of Jailton Almeida is what makes him a very safe play because he can take you down and he's not reliant on his submissions. He will utilize ground and pound, unlike a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. If his ground and pound's not working, the ground and pound will set up a submission. It's tough to say that he's not going to gas out if it goes the distance. Obviously, it's a five round bout, but it's heavyweight MMA. I don't know which heavyweight is not going to gas out if it, extends up beyond 15 minutes. So there's nothing to show me that he's going to gas out here. 9,600, one of my favorite plays on the slate, sprinkling some Jairzinho Rozenstruik exposure. He was able to defend some takedowns against Ciryl Gane. That did go 25 minutes. Ciryl Gane was unsuccessful in 12 of his takedown attempts. Doesn't have the same type of grappling pedigree that Jailton Almeida has. But it's just something to note. Jairzinho trains at American Top Team, surrounded by fantastic heavyweights and light heavyweights. 𝐉𝐸�𝐵𝐿𝐼 is going to have his wrestling prepared for the most part, but if he does get taken down once, that might be all she wrote. So Jailton Almeida, 9,600. Let's just hope if he wins, it's not too quickly.
You mentioned 𝐉𝐸𝐿𝐼's name, and I feel like when we talk about American Top Team, he's the coach that does not get enough credit for what he does, because I can tell you, as someone who has interviewed a ton of ATT fighters, they all talk about 𝐉𝐸𝐿𝐼 when they talk about wrestling, and you see them light up when they talk about 𝐉𝐸𝐿𝐼, and they'll tell you, they'll go, look, those training sessions suck. Go, there is nothing but like just as you were kind of talking, it just something that just popped in my head. Looking over the betting side of the equation here, look, I wouldn't want to touch unless you're looking for parlay pieces of taking that 5-1 Jailton Almeida. I get that, but like looking at some of these props over here, like, maybe if you think Jailton takes him down and maybe he doesn't get the submission, it's a TKO. plus 175. I mean, you got to be looking at these either win by TKO KO or win by submission for Jailton Almeida. I mean, look, if you're looking to place a Rozenstruik, I would I mean, I understand chasing the coin here, that plus 475 win by TKO KO, but at that point I would just take the plus 375.
Right, exactly, because who knows, maybe Jailton just completely gasses and Jailton is sitting there scared. We've seen Rozenstruik in some strange contests where it's just like a staring contest at times, and his low volume is what makes this almost like an automatic play to play Jailton Almeida. He just has that death touch. But I will say, as far as like game strategy and how I like to think, now that I'm more so hand building now, and I've been super successful doing that, because if I'm going into a 150 max, I don't recommend hand building at all. That's going to take too much time, and you probably have duplicates. But in a 20 max, I think like I do much better when I can hand build and I know how I'm going to make my lineups. And when you do something like that, I think it's important to view what the public thinks is an automatic win. Which fighter is everybody just completely too bullish on? And last week it was Drew Dober, right? Like, and it happens to work out like that, where everybody just automatically not considering the opposite fighter. Get to that opposite fighter a little bit. Jairzinho Rozenstruik is going to be super low owned. He's one of the best heavyweights out there. Jailton, this is a test, but I think that Jailton passes with flying colors. But make sure you don't just completely cross off somebody.
Look, I love that haymaker contest 20 max, and when I woke up Sunday morning, I go, oh, I recognize that guy coming in third place, and only 5 points away from taking it down.
Yeah, I think it was like 3 or something like that, but it was a good week.
I had one lineup going into the main event, co-main event that was all of them had 100 plus points. Unfortunately, I had the losers in both the but I will say this, while you're talking about hand building, for the most part, in a 20 max, I'm using Fantasy Cruncher of going in there and whatever, maybe there's another optimizer someone likes to use. But when I found myself last Saturday, I'm sitting in my Airbnb and I probably ran 30 crunches.
Trying my Airbnb.
Yeah, bro, I was out. I felt like I was up in Connecticut with you. This place is in the woods, because for FSU graduation, unless you want to spend about $1,000 a night for a hotel room, you got to find Airbnb. So, we had to find something, but it was one of those things of like, and it's the challenges when we're talking about building lineups with something an optimizer like Fantasy Cruncher. There were certain fires I was like, God, I was getting way too much go at Burns. Mm-hmm. And then I just felt I was not getting enough of the Parker Porter and Braxton Smith fight. I mean, I was getting like 15, 20% on each guy. And I was like, God, I need more. And that's where you start putting in groups and I start to overthink it.
Yeah.
And sometimes overthinking can really be a bad thing in DFS. 100%. Sometimes you just got to kind of, you got to go in there, go with your projections, but there are certain fights. And I mean, this is a card that I'll tell you, like the Kim and Bohm fight, 10% exposure.
Ooh, okay.
I mean, I would tell you this, like Mandy Bohm might be X'd out.
Women's MMA, you can't X out the underdog, bro. What are you doing? But I hear what you're saying. And for me, like when I'm hand building, right, how I do it to make sure that I'm just not entering the same lineups and all that, I go to like the highest paid contest and I hand build and try to enter it when I don't have that balance or whatnot. Then when I exit out, I say, okay, I got 13 lineups, even though in my head I entered 20 of them. And then I can really start to figure out the last 7, how I can get different. And it's been working out really well for me doing it. This is how I used to do it back in the day. And when I was doing it like this, I was killing it. And then I got into the 150s, and I like the 150s because they're fun, the biggest money and everything. But if you can take your intelligence and everything and compress it into 20 good lineups, most people playing MMA DFS have no damn clue what the hell they're doing. So that's where you can just outsmart a lot of people. Whereas in a 150, you got to beat the brains, which is is kind of tough at times.
Yeah, that's a hard thing. Like, when you're playing in those type of contests, you just have to understand who you're going up against.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest about it. If we're talking about a 150 max, I mean, anywhere from 30 to 40 people are probably max entering it, and then,
At least,
but for me, like in those contests where if I'm just going to like throw a couple, flyers in there, I get super aggressive on those.
you have to.
You can't go in there with that chalk lineup because otherwise, you gotta, and that's what I think makes this Saturday slate very difficult, is just because I just don't love a lot of underdogs. Now, I think a fight that could be very intriguing for DFS is the co-main event of Johnny Walker and Anthony Smith. Straight up pick 'em fight here, -110 on both sides. Johnny Walker 8,200, Anthony Smith is 8,000. FanDuel $16 and $15 respectively, and part of my thought with Anthony Smith here, and I'll get your take on this, Pete, is kind of, returning from injury from last year. And, we saw him as a backup fighter earlier this year, and he just did not look good on the scale.
I don't know what's going on with Anthony Smith and his weigh-ins. I don't think that he has the same type of body composition that he used to. Clearly, he's aging. But I used to think that he was somewhat shredded, and, he could be prioritizing certain things within his training, maybe laying off of certain strength and conditioning factors. But I have to tell you, like, Anthony Smith also hasn't looked good. The Ryan Spann fight, he surprised me, but the 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐵 fight, that's a tough fight for anybody. But just in general, this is a volatile fight to target. And last week, I didn't care how the main event went because I had the same exact lineup with Aljamain Sterling, and I had the same exact lineup with Henry Cejudo. I would recommend basically doing the same thing this week. I don't care who wins this fight. Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith, 8,200, 8,000 respectively. I can make an argument for either one of them, right? Johnny Walker probably has the higher upside because of his ridiculous aggressiveness. He's very reckless at times, and that can be worked against him because he can run into shots. Anthony Smith talked about it. We've seen Johnny Walker get KO'd so terribly before, so much damage on that brain that, Anthony Smith could hit him with a jab and wobble him and then follow up. But I think as far as upside, aggressiveness, and kind of just like form, right at the moment, I think that Johnny Walker has more momentum behind him. It's a winnable fight for Anthony Smith all day long. But the lean is to Johnny Walker. As far as exposure, I'm getting to more Johnny Walker than Anthony Smith. But make sure that you're not like too aggressive, because at the end of the day, it's a pick'em fight and they're both unreliable. So I do view this fight as a GPP priority, though. I can't see where they both sit back and this goes 15 minutes. I think somebody's getting finished. It's going to be violent, and I'm going to be leaning towards Johnny Walker getting his hand raised.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Johnny Walker as well. And I was just kind of, looking at the MVP ownership projections right now on Johnny Walker. I think that's when you're talking about getting away from the chalk of Jailton Almeida, Karl Williams, Carlos Ulberg. Johnny Walker could be a guy you look at it. And Anthony Smith, I kind of, I do wonder, and I heard someone else bring this thought process up, and they were talking about these fighters who are still competing, but are also working as commentators for the UFC, of kind of, wondering, kind of what's going on there. But, obviously the longer this fight goes, I do think it favors Anthony Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I can counter that point, and like, just because you're a commentator doesn't mean like that's going to affect you fighting. Just because you train fighters does not mean that's going to affect you fighting. We some of the best fighters back in the day and even today, on their way up, are working 9 to 5s and getting out of work and then training like crazy. It's all how bad you want to train before, but before they go into work, after they go into work, balancing that family lifestyle. And I actually think that having a job or a career within the field that you're practicing and performing in, so like you're being a commentator or a coach within MMA where you're still competing, I think that holds more merit and value than if you picked up a construction side gig or something like that. At least you're involved in the sport every single day. So, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that at all. It does kind of seem like it's like a commentator curse, though. Once that starts being presented to them, that they could be on their way out. But I think that Anthony Smith has as many fights left as he wants. So.
Now, looking at the betting side of this one, we mentioned about the straight up money line being a pick 'em here, but if you want to look at it, I would be looking at this inside the distance. I mean, I understand you maybe get a little bit more value here, particularly on the Anthony Smith side of the equation, but I'd be kind of looking at that inside the distance, plus 135 on Johnny Walker, plus 145 on Anthony Smith. But I mean, look, if you want to lay a prop bet on Anthony Smith, if you feel comfortable whether it's TKO, KO, or submission, you do get a better juice there.
Yeah, I think somebody's getting knocked out. I just do. We've seen Anthony Smith pull off some sneaky submissions, but everything Johnny Walker volatility is considered is all about his chin. So his best way to beat somebody is by throwing knees, elbows, vicious punches, hammer fists, all of that. And the best way to counter Johnny Walker is by testing that chin. So I would probably target that fight as whereas the method of victory is just one via KO, TKO. That's how I'm predicting it to go, with the lean towards Johnny Walker.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that I'm looking at in terms of that one. By the way, I did see a little clip on social media. Apparently, Dominic Cruz talked about last weekend that he's actually changing up his fighting style because of the judging criteria.
Interesting. I'll believe it when I see it, but I don't know how to.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Let's move over to the next one. And I know this is going to be, when we talk about underdogs, I think the popular underdog of the week this week is going to be Daniel Rodriguez taking on Ian Garry. Ian Garry is a 3-1 betting favorite, plus 240 for Daniel Rodriguez. Garry is $9,000 on DK, $20 on FanDuel, and Rodriguez is $7,200 on DK. $10 on FanDuel. I mentioned about earlier, there's a GPP versus cash discussion here. As a cash gameplay, I don't mind Daniel Rodriguez. I don't think this is a fight that I don't know if I'll get a ton to in GPPs, Pete.
I'm going to get to it just because I think that the volume of both fighters might bring out the best of each other. Ian Garry could be viewed a little low because he was dropped by Song Kenan badly and almost finished. I believe it was in the first round. And rallied back, might have been in the second, but he rallied back and ended up picking up a beautiful KO over Song Kenan in the third round. And up until that point, it really looked bad for Ian Garry. He was doing fine, and then it was moments from being taken away from him. So I do think that there is some concern about Gary's chin to a point, and I do think that somebody is going to expose him in a way. I think he's really good, though. Like, I really think that this kid is excellent. I've watched sparring footage, and I know it's sparring, but I've seen him sparring the likes of Shavkat Rakhmonov, and like picking apart Rakhmonov. I know it's just sparring, but the skills are there for this kid. Daniel Rodriguez did not look good in his previous bout against Neil Magny, but in every single fight, he is a gamer. He possesses a ton of volume, so he'll throw a ton. And then he has some solid jiu-jitsu, but I almost think it's overrated to a point because he was completely exposed against Neil Magny, but Magny's reach makes everybody, just flustered. So now you have Ian Garry, who was knocked down, but ultimately won against Song Kenan, against Daniel Rodriguez looking to pick himself back up after not an embarrassing defeat to Neil Magny, but a pretty decisive one. So I'm going to be going with Ian Garry, and I think he's just on the outside going to pick Daniel Rodriguez apart. As far as underdogs, it's pretty obvious that Daniel Rodriguez might be one of the most popular underdogs, given his cheap salary, given his high volume, given the slight concern surrounding Ian Garry's chin from the last performance. And, he is 7-2 in the UFC, whereas Ian Garry is only 4-0. Rodriguez has beaten the likes of Tim Means in his debut, Gabe Green, Dwight Grant, lost to Nicholas Dalby, win over Mike Perry, Preston Parsons, Kevin Lee, and Li Jingliang, who I thought he lost to. So some pretty high-profile names. Ian Garry hasn't done so. Just Song Kenan, Gabriel Green, Darian Weeks, and Jordan Williams. But I think this is going to be a nice name to add to Ian Garry's resume. So I think that at 9,000, he could be one of those guys that throws with ton of volume and might surprise some people from the DFS score.
Yeah, my concern is about going 15 minutes and whether or not you can be optimal at 9,000 without say there's no takedowns, no knockdowns. Can you be optimal with that price tag? On the betting side, I really do like Ian Garry win by decision plus 135. That's probably the prop bet that sticks out to me the most. I mean, look, if you want to take Daniel Rodriguez, I would just take the plus 240. But if you want to chase some money, Rodriguez via decision plus 500 is one. But my recommendation is if you like Daniel Rodriguez, just take the plus 240.
Yeah, I like Ian Garry, but I think the public is just going to be desperate for an underdog. And I lost my guy, Pete Rodriguez, this week, who I thought was going to come through. So natural pivot, go to a guy that has a pretty impressive resume in the UFC, and that's going to be Daniel Rodriguez for a lot of people.
Next up, we got a matchup of another 9,000 fire. That's Ulberg, who's 9,300, a minus 420 betting favorite, taking on Ihor here, who's 6,900. He's a plus 330 betting underdog. And I think the thing that sticks out to me about Potieria here is, you look at that fight against Shogun. I think we all kind of saw what that was. But also, I kind of do wonder, maybe is the UFC putting him as a B-side of the fight because of his post-fight actions?
Oh, you think so? Well, I will tell you that this is an intriguing striking matchup. One where I think Carlos Ulberg clearly is the more technical striker over Ihor Potieria. The one thing that you can fluster the young Ihor Potieria by doing is by pressing him like Nikolai did, but also incorporating takedowns. So basically just keeping him on his back foot will exhaust him. This is a stylistically tailor-made matchup for both fighters. They both should be in striking matchups. We saw what Ihor was able to do against Shogun Rua. Granted, it's Shogun Rua. In his final fight, he did not look good. Carlos Ulberg is a fantastic striker. We saw him pick apart Kennedy Nzechukwu, but ultimately was fatigued, and then when the tide was turned, he got hit with some big damaging shots and was knocked out in the second round against Kennedy Nzechukwu. That loss has really aged well because Kennedy looks like an actual force within the division. He's a massive man. Rebounding off of that after that defeat, going against Fabio Cherant, I thought it was a really tough fight for Fabio, especially if it was just on the feet. And walking away with just a decision there was a little surprising, and it was more so because he was just so patient. Perhaps it was just a safe performance, but he followed that up with a knockout over Tafon Nchukwi and then a first-round knockout over Nikolai. So with all that being said, that's a long-winded way of saying I'm going to get to both sides of this fight. I do think that Carlos Ulberg is the clear A side. He has the more technical skills, but he does invite a brawl by keeping his hands low. He's able to hit you at funky angles, like a nice check hook, angled shots, because his hands are low and his opponents don't see it. But that comes at a cost too, especially if somebody's just going to capitalize and counter you. You can get dropped by lesser shots than something that Ihor is going to throw. So Ihor Potieria at 6,900 is going to be a guy I'm not crossing off. I think from a technicality standpoint, he's going to be behind Carlos Ulberg, but he does have that one-shot capability because of Ulberg's hand placement. So I'm going to be going Carlos Ulberg, but I like this fight. I think it's a nice little fight to target.
Yeah, I mean, to me, GPPs, and like we've kind of mentioned a couple of times before in the show of, trying to find those underdogs that we got to try to find because this is going to be a tough underdog week. Next up, we got Alex Morono taking on Tim Means. Kind of, you talk about OGs of the sport. Tim Means definitely an OG of this sport. He is a plus 180 betting underdog. Alex Morono minus 220. Morono 8,800 on DK, $18 on FanDuel. Means 7,400 on DK, $13 on FanDuel, Pete.
You know what's crazy is if that third round didn't exist for Alex Morono against 𝐉𝐸𝐴𝐽 Ponzinibbio, he would be on a 5-fight win streak because he looked damn good against 𝐉𝐸𝐴𝐽 Ponzinibbio early. And Morono has somewhat surprised me because this is the same guy that got dismantled against Anthony Pettis. And we know what we all valued Pettis at within 2022. That was back in 2020. And even more so, we've seen just the decline of Anthony Pettis, who's now boxing and everything. But he took a short notice fight against Donald Cerrone, then picked up a win over David Zavada, Mickey Gall, Matthew Semmelsberger, that fight against Matthew Semmelsberger means a lot, right? Like Semmelsberger is solid, especially on the feet. So I think that Tim Means, the older veteran here, 14-11-1 inside the UFC's octagon. I think Tim Means is going to get finished here, Jason. And I think there's multiple ways he can get finished. Morono, for the most part, you go and you look and dive into his career inside the UFC. There are some finishes scattered, but a lot of decisions. The way that Tim Means absorbs shots nowadays and how desperate he is to engage in a grappling contest makes me think that Morono is going to have his way here. I think from a stature standpoint, it surprises me that Morono is a welterweight. But because Tim Means is so damn long for the division. But at 7,400, there was a point when Means was very aggressive on the feet. He could hit you with high volume. He was beating up Niko Price, and then Niko Price landed that one shot. And ever since that, it's kind of been like a slow decline for Tim Means. And, rightfully so. He's been around for a long time. But I'm going to be picking Alex Morono here. If it goes the distance, this could be a high volume striking affair where the underdog could possibly steal it. But I think it's even smarter to get to Morono a little bit more than what the public's probably going to do, just because I think he has multiple paths to victory here, and I think he might find a sneaky finish here at 8,800.
Yeah, I had mentioned to Pete right before the show, I was talking about, sneaky prop bets. I was looking at that Alex Morono wins via submission plus 650 as kind of a little bit of an under the radar prop bet. We'll see what plays out in terms of that one. Now, when we talk about OGs of the sport, I remember being in the building when Court McGee won the Ultimate Fighter, and that just being an emotional night there. Of course, he is taking on Matt Brown. Court McGee, a minus 220 betting favorite, plus 180 for Matt Brown. Court McGee, 8,700 DK, $18 on FanDuel. Brown, 7,500 on DK, $13 on FanDuel, Pete.
Yeah, I like this fight, right? Like I like it from a viewing aspect as a fan. For DFS, not really sure. I think it's pretty clear. Court McGee's good at winning decisions, and he can surprise a lot of people just by being there and being tough. If he implements his wrestling, he's a completely different fighter. So I'm going to be getting to Court McGee because of the high takedown attempts that he does have, even against a prolific grappler and Ramiz Brahimaj. He attempted 11 takedowns and landed 5 of them. He attempted a long time ago against Dominique Steele, 15 attempts, 6 attempts scattered throughout, 11 attempts against Sean Strickland. So, I like that. And I just like this fight in general. I do think that Matt Brown can get taken down, but he can punish you if you are unsuccessful with your takedown. So I'm going to be going with Matt Brown here. I think the Bryan Barberena performance is really sticking out to me. And I know that's just a stand-up scrap, but I do think that Matt Brown showcasing he can go to the takedowns as well, getting 5 of 7 is interesting. Throwing 129 significant strikes, scoring 69 fantasy points in a loss. Okay, so it would have been 99 if he ended up getting that second judge to award him the decision because it was a split decision defeat. So I like Matt Brown here as an underdog, and not a week where I'm in love with a lot of underdogs, but I'm going to take a shot that Matt Brown could test the chin of Court McGee, who's coming off a devastating knockout defeat to 𝐉𝐸𝐬𝐽 back in June. So last June, almost a year away. So I'm happy he took time off, but I'm going to be leaning towards Matt Brown here to just be a little bit more violent, even though he is, pretty damn old for the division.
My thing is, and it's a term that you hear fighters, and I'm sure you talk about this on the daily inside of your gym there, is blending everything together. Oh, yeah. And I feel like if Court McGee can blend everything together, that to me is his clear path in this one. But I've got no issues with things you said there. I mean, McGee's going to be my pick, but I get where you're coming from.
Well, I'll tell you what from a coaching standpoint, right? Let's say my guy just got knocked out. The last damn thing I'm going to say is let's kickbox with Matt Brown. So, what we're going to do, though, is because we know Matt Brown's expecting the takedown, we are actually going to plant a little seed in Matt Brown's head that we're okay with striking. And then when you think that we're okay with striking, we're changing levels and we're blending it. We're mixing takedowns. So you hit the nail right on the head. Blending the game is what can really open up a lot of opportunities for you. And, I think that McGee clearly has that dominant wrestling in his back pocket. So I think it's a close fight. I thought the odds were going to be a little bit closer. So there is value on Matt Brown's side, but I'm circling this fight. This does seem like a GPP priority.
But in terms of, the prop bets here, I mean, plus 550, Matt Brown wins via decision.
Nah, it's not bad at all. Not bad at all. And a banger. I think that's a good location bet right there. That's pretty damn good.
Now, one of our biggest favorites of this fight card is Karl Williams taking on Chase Sherman. Minus 400 betting favorite here for Karl Williams. Plus 310 for Chase Sherman. 9,400 for Williams on DK. 21 on FanDuel. Chase Sherman 6,800 and then 9 on FanDuel. Of course, this fight was supposed to happen. It gets pulled on fight day. I mean, we've kind of broken this one down. I mean, look, we know what Chase Sherman is. We know what, to me, it's more of a question of, like, I feel like this week, Pete, people are going to be comparing. Do you go Karl Williams or do you go Jailton Almeida?
Yeah, I mean, if you were just going to look at it on paper, who's the worst opponent? It's clearly Chase Sherman, right? Like, Chase Sherman somehow got himself back into the UFC by just being willing to take horrible matchups and just like raising his hand when nobody else will. So my dad always says showing up's half the battle. And, he's always been willing to show up. So at 6,800, there is some volatility just because it is the heavyweight division. And let's just say Karl Williams can't get the fight to the mat immediately. We did see his hands on his knees. He was exhausted throughout his debut against 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐼𝐻, but he powered through that. He still scored 129 fantasy points because he went 8 of 13. That's a featherweight work rate right there. That is fantastic. And he had a knockdown. So I know that the visual of him with his hands on his knees is something to be worried about. I think that Chase Sherman can be taken down a lot easier than 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐼𝐻. They're both comparable, but I do think that Sherman has clearly shown that's his Achilles heel, and he has a ridiculous amount of losses inside the UFC as well. So Chase Sherman's 4-10 in the UFC. Do you realize that, Jason? So 6,800. If Karl Williams goes out there and says, you know what, I've been wrestling so much, my coaches think I can do just fine with my striking, so I'm going to test my striking, and I know I can go to the takedowns if I absolutely need it. That's where he doesn't pay off this salary, because I don't think it's where Chase Sherman just defends everything. I think it would be more on Karl Williams' fight IQ and just kind of making that development mistake or wanting to develop his game and go out there and just strike. I know tons of coaches that make their guys, okay, this fight, we're just going to strike. We're just going to grapple. We're just going to utilize our wrestling, trying to improve them fight by fight. And I do think that can be dangerous. But all in all, it's a Karl Williams victory for me, and I'm going to be getting to him a ton at 9,400.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the takedown potential. I mean, it's we'll talk at the end of the show about PrizePicks, but I don't think I necessarily want to get to 3 takedowns on PrizePicks. Karl Williams. By the way, PrizePicks does have a free square on Joel Embiid, so when you're making your cards for Saturday, throw in that free square so you get 4 here on the UFC here. But the 36.5 significant strikes for Karl Williams, I think, is the one that intrigues me kind of, especially if this fight does go on. Say into the second and third round. If he does, I mean, who says he doesn't try to work a little bit on a stand-up game instead of, just taking him straight to the ground? That's just kind of a thought for me. Next up, we got Cody Stamann taking on Douglas da Silva de Andrade. Cody is a minus 155 betting favorite, plus 130 for Andrade. Cody's 8,500 on DK, $17 on FanDuel, and Andrade 7,700 on DK, $14 on FanDuel. But this is a fight that, and we're going to see how ownership plays out, Pete, over the next, day here. But this is, to me, a fight. When you're talking about looking at ownership and where to get over on the field, this is a fight that I'm looking at.
I hear you. I definitely hear you with that, because Cody Stamann at 8,500 supposedly possesses fantastic wrestling. It's just dependent on whether he wants to utilize it or not. If you tell me he laces up those wrestling shoes, attempts only a handful of takedowns, I don't think it's necessary, right? Like, I don't think getting to him is going to be necessary. But if he's getting hurt on the feet, that could make him say, you know what, I'm wrestling today. If he attempts 12 takedowns as he did in his debut against Terrion Ware, and as he also did against Song Yadong because of the dangerous power opposite of him, guess what? He might break the slate there at 8,500. So I completely understand what you're saying. I think that Douglas Silva de Andrade can get taken down, as shown in the past, has some good jiu-jitsu for people that, will, try to take him down. So you got to stay out of that guillotine territory. He can defend some takedowns, but he can also get ragdolled. And that cardio is a complete liability. So it's the cardio liability of this Douglas Silva de Andrade versus the pace of Cody Stamann. Cody Stamann could break him. I really think that he could break him, but he's the type of guy that I'm sitting there saying, come on, push the pace, push the pace. And sometimes he's just a little lackadaisical, a little too lackadaisical for me. He got finished relatively quickly against Said Nurmagomedov with a guillotine. That was deep as hell. But if he goes out there, he might be able to have his way with Douglas Silva de Andrade, despite the KO power, despite the submission acumen that he has. I'm picking Cody Stamann to win a decision, but I wouldn't cross off the fact that he could really go out there and just impose his will and break Douglas Silva de Andrade. That cardio and that age is going to catch up to him, and I think Cody Stamann is. I think he's solid for the division. I'm picking Stamann at 8,500.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at who Cody's lost in this division, I mean, it's the top of this division. I mean, he's never been able to take that hump. But what would concern me, Pete, is if he doesn't go the takedown route and he makes this a striking matchup. That's where that's the concern, and that's why I think that if you're a multi-injury player, that this is about playing both sides of this fight. But to me, it's always about an ownership play in terms of this one. Next up, we got a female matchup. Jeongyeon Kim taking on Mandy Bohm. Jeongyeon Kim minus 230 betting favorite, plus 190 for Mandy Bohm, 8,900 on DK for Kim, 17 on FanDuel, and Bohm is 7,300 on DK, $14 on FanDuel. Pete, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Jeongyeon Kim here a lot, 8,900. I do. I think that I think that she's had an unfair shake in some of her fights, and she's always going out there and throwing with a ton of volume. So I like that, right? Especially when you're going up against a fighter that gets hit a lot in Mandy Bohm. So I think the strength of schedule to this point clearly favors Jeongyeon Kim. I understand it's women's MMA. I understand that certain fights in women's MMA shouldn't have wide odds. But I think this makes complete sense. This is the same woman who went 15 minutes with 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐵, scored 68 fantasy points. I thought she won that fight. She almost threw 400 significant strikes, Jason. She landed 170, so absolute brutal accuracy. But that's still a ton. Like, you throw enough stuff at the wall, something needs to stick. And I think that's clearly what Jeongyeon Kim can do. She can pick up a KO victory over Mandy Bohm. Bohm is a fighter that I'm just not sold on. Victoria Leonardo, not high level. Ariana Lipski, inconsistent. But if you go and you just dive into what Mandy Bohm does, outside of being the underdog in women's MMA, I don't know anything about Mandy Bohm having significant success over Jeongyeon Kim. I think it's Jeongyeon Kim all day long. The fear is that it just goes the distance and she doesn't break 90 points. I think it goes the distance. And, against 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐵, she scored 68 fantasy points. That would be 98 if she was actually given the victory. So I think Jeongyeon Kim might break this slate as far as volume is concerned. So, yeah, give me Jeongyeon Kim. I'm not going to cross off Mandy Bohm because of the volatility I spoke of, but I think Jeongyeon Kim's a lot better than what her record shows.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I definitely do not want to get to the Mandy side of this equation. I mean, it's definitely a side, but I understand where you're going for here. And look, Kim at 8,900, 20% ownership. It's an interesting
Not
one.
Bad. Yeah, it ain't bad. It ain't bad.
I mean,
at all.
look, when we're talking about GPPs, that's a core philosophy for me. Is utilizing ownership projections to your advantage and sitting there and going, okay, who are the fighters that are not getting owned? I mean, we talk about it I feel like we talk about this every week, Pete. Is like who we always go, who's that 9,000 fighter that's just not getting ownership, and who could potentially be that one to get over there. Let's move over. Next up, we got a matchup between Gabe Green and Bryan Battle. Gabe Green is the favorite here, -135, +115 for Bryan Battle. Over on DK, Green 8,300, 16 on FanDuel, and Battle 7,900 on DK, $15 on FanDuel.
Kind of struggling with this one, Jason. I gotta tell you, kind of struggling with this one. I do think that Bryan Battle is pretty damn big for the division. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did Bryan Battle miss weight today?
Yes, I saw you went 173.
That's what I saw as well. So, stepping up on short notice to kind of step in there against Gabe Green, who already had an original opponent fall out. I don't like seeing that, but it is what it is, right? Like, guys are just trying to save a card or hop on any opportunity. I do think that they are going to go 15 minutes. I don't think somebody's getting finished here. I think it's going to be a damn good fight. Gabe Green can get hit a lot. He was lit up like a Christmas tree against Ian Garry. I do think that he is well-rounded, but the same could be said for Bryan Battle. Bryan Battle has looked really good, except for his previous performance against Rinat Fakhretdinov, who is an absolute monster as far as takedowns are considered and ground and pound. So I don't know, man. I think I'm going to lean with the guy who had a full camp, even though I think Bryan Battle's probably in shape and ready and can win this fight all day long. Bryan Battle probably one of the best underdogs on the slate at 7,900. Gabe Green gets hurt in multiple fights. I don't see a submission advantage from one or the other, but I'm going to be going with Gabe Green at 8,300 to win a decision. Not really, I'm not hating on the underdog at Bryan Battle if you get to him at all.
Yeah, I mean, I do lean on Gabe Green in this matchup, but Bryan Battle did miss weight, coming in at 173. The fight will proceed as a catchweight matchup, and he has been fined a portion of his purse. And then the opening matchup of the card, a female matchup, we got Lisboa taking on Rose Clark. Lisboa -120 betting favorite, +100 for Rose Clark. And then put on the DK side of the equation, 8,400 and 7,800 respectively, and 16-15. Kind of a close fight here, but this is one of these fights me and Pete had a little good conversation before the show about. And my issue with Lisboa is when you talk about, since her making the switch from Muay Thai to MMA, Pete, can crush her.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I'm not going to argue that. It's true. Women's MMA is tough, especially in certain, areas of the world, just finding opponents that weigh the same. And, Tainara Lisboa, a two-time Muay Thai champion, excellent Muay Thai. She has had a career in a different sport, in another combat sport, and now she's, transitioned into MMA years ago. But she's also fought some notable names, even though she was unsuccessful. She has been working on her takedown defense because she needs to, and that's what everybody's going to be doing, is trying to take her down. I even think Jessica Rose Clark is going to be looking to take her down, because I don't think that Jessica Rose Clark, as much as she likes to strike, as much as she likes to hit pads, and show a ton on social media that she enjoys striking, I don't think she likes it when it's coming back her way. Tainara Lisboa had Norma Dumont. That's the name. I was trying to look it up. I'm like, I know she fought somebody. I remember watching that fight. She had Norma Dumont desperate, and that was like 6-7 years ago. So that was back in.
Wasn't that her first? Wasn't that her MMA debut?
It was. So yeah, it was. It was her MMA debut. I mean, she's fought Valentina Shevchenko in Muay Thai too. So I really think that Tainara Lisboa, great memory, Jason. I think Tainara Lisboa is mean, so mean that I think Jessica Rose Clark, who has been so inconsistent in the UFC, she's been hurt. She's going to be shooting takedowns like crazy. So on one end, we have takedown city potential. She's attempted 11 in one fight, and that was against Jocelyn Edwards. Only was successful in 5. I think Tainara Lisboa is going to be more physical. She's stronger, in my opinion, and I think she's going to I really think she's going to brutalize Jessica Rose Clark in the Muay Thai plum. I think it's going to be some knees to the body, and I think she's just going to take the fight out of Jessica Rose Clark. So 7,800, She might be yeah, she is. Now that Pete Rodriguez is gone, she's my favorite underdog on the slate. But I'm getting to both sides just because of the volatility of women's MMA. Tainara Lisboa is going to finish Jessica Rose Clark via TKO.
It's first fight of the night, Pete.
There we go.
First fight of the night has for the most part, has not been treating me really well the past couple weeks. I'd gone on a nice little run there. And then, recently it just has not done well for me. Let's get into our straight-up fight picks. These are non-DFS, non-betting related, just our straight-up picks. Main event, I will go Jailton Almeida.
Yeah, Almeida.
Walker Smith, I do think it's a coin flip fight, but I'm going to go with the younger Johnny Walker.
Johnny Walker.
Garry and Rodriguez, I will go with Garry.
Garry.
I'm telling you, folks, this is going to be chalk central for me. I'll go Carlos Ulberg. I'll go Morono. I'm going to give McGee. Hopefully he blends things.
Yeah, Matt Brown for me.
Karl Williams.
Cody
Stamann. Jeon Kim. I'll go Gabe Green. I'm going to go Jessica Rose Clark because I just don't like the strength of schedule.
Yeah, I'm going Tainara Lisboa. I might since I lost an underdog, I was not so confident on, but pretty bullish on. And now that you look throughout the entire card and it's you're not really in love with a ton of underdogs, I might get super aggressive with Lisboa. She might be my aggressive play of the week.
We'll get into some listener questions here momentarily. I do want to talk about PrizePicks, as there are some things over in PrizePicks that do intrigue me. The main event, I think it's play one or the other. It's either take the under 4-minute fight time on Jailton Almeida or take the over 1.5 takedowns. I'd probably more lean to going over 1.5 takedowns, just hoping Rozenstruik can actually get up once. I do like, I would say the more 14 3/4 fight time on Ian Garry, just because I think that fight's going 15 minutes. I don't mind going over 8.5 significant strikes. I think it's going to be a high volume fight. Slight lean on Morono, under 14 3/4 fight time. For some reason, I see a third round finish coming in that matchup. Court McGee over 1.5 takedowns. Karl Williams over 36.5 significant strikes. Obviously, that's in relation to it going more than one round. I like Cody Stamann over 1.5 takedowns. And look, if you like Lisboa like Pete does, you take the under 65.5 fantasy score for Jessica Rose Clark.
Yeah, I like that one. Jason's always on top of the prize picks for you guys. He's fantastic with that. So make sure you guys are taking advantage of that. He's always giving out excellent picks over there. And Jason, we got a great amount of people checking us out right now. So we really appreciate it if you guys can hit that like button, get us over 100 likes. If you're not subscribed to the channel, if you can hit that subscribe bell. And in addition to that, if you have any quick questions, just throw them into chat.
Well, and of course, be sure to join our Discord channel. Totally free to join. Great community, great conversations we have throughout the week and on fight night. So I want to get some Discord questions in here. Tristan saying, rank the 9K option and who has the best takedown upside? Obviously, takedown upside, I got to go Karl Williams right there. I think that's an easy one.
Yeah, it's going to be Williams. Almeida's right behind him because that's what he needs to do against Rozenstruik.
Now, in terms of ranking them, I think 1-2 is easy on this one. I think it's a 1A, 1B situation for me. The reason I would put Williams ahead of Almeida is just because I could see Almeida just getting a finish 3 minutes in, and the fantasy score upside, it could potentially be higher for Karl Williams.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you need your opponents to help boost the score. So we need Sherman to get up, or we need Jairzinho to get up, and Sherman's pretty damn bad, so he might get taken down one time. It might be all she wrote. Maybe Jairzinho, working at American Top Team, gets up and defends. We've seen him defend more takedowns than Sherman. So in his 5 rounds, I'm still going to go with Jailton number 1. I've seen more, and I believe in his skills rather than just Karl Williams over. We've only seen Karl Williams fight one time, so I still think that he's excellent, but it's Jailton Almeida 1, Williams 2.
And then it would be Ulberg 3, Garry 4 for me.
I'm going to flip that.
Okay.
I'm going to flip that just from being a little contrarian. I'm going to flip that. I think that Ian Garry might surprise some people this weekend.
Next up here, it is out of the 9K fighters, who has the biggest chance to lose?
I think it's Ulberg, just because his hands are down.
Yeah.
That's literally my only reason. He's way better than Ihor, but that's like my only reason. They're all excellent options.
Yeah, and by the way, if people are not aware, the Carlos Rodriguez and Tom Levy fight is scratched. It was scratched earlier today. I guess the term that now gets thrown out, Pete, weight management issues is the term that now gets thrown out.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Sam, biggest leveraged fight or fighters? I mentioned it earlier. It's the Andrade Stamann fight, just because of ownership, and Pete, you bring up a great point. Of Kim, I think is another potential leverage spot there. Favorite core plays. I mean, I hate to give the top two guys on this card, but that would be my top two. Would be Karl Williams and Jailton Almeida, just because of the takedown upside.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it is what it is. If it's the top two plays, you got to say it. Outside of that, it's the 8,200, 8,000 fight between Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker. It's just it's a close fight that I think is going to be finished inside of 15 minutes. So, you don't need a lot to go right for that score to really boost at that salary. You know what I mean? Like, even 80 something points at that salary is just like, that's awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like when I'm making a cash core lineup that it's going to be Almeida or Williams paired with Walker or Smith, and then the third fighter is going to be D-Rod, just because of if he goes 15 minutes and it's a straight up striking matchup, I like the floor.
Yeah, I don't know how many lineups with both Jailton Almeida and Karl Williams with Anthony Smith / Johnny Walker and Pete Rodriguez, but now I can't do that build, so I might have to pivot to some other cheap options.
Top dart play, Potieria is probably the one that sticks with me as a dart.
Yeah, I mean, if he wins, it's by knockout. He's not going to beat Ulberg in a technical striking matchup.
Yeah. And Sam's over under 6.5.
We got 11 now?
Yeah.
Less.
I think it's a good number. I'm telling you, I think that's a good number. Sam, you were crazy last week with your number, but I think that's a damn good number. Give me under 6.5.
Yeah, same with me. Under.
Let's see here. Let's get some questions in here from the chat. Jordan saying underdog D-Rod is my favorite play on the card. I understand why you say that, but to me that's more of a cash play than anything else.
That too. That's what I'm saying, Jason. Like, I think it's going to make Ian Garry have less ownership than what people really think, because like, we're desperate for an underdog. Daniel Rodriguez might be everybody's go-to, which could leave Garry just so low as far as ownership's considered.
It's a great point. Great point, Pete. Do we feel like stacking one?
Hell no.
No, I mean, there's, the only fight that I'm not recommending stacking. Let me just say that. A fight that would have the recipe potentially, Morono and Tim Means.
Yeah, I can't do it this week. It makes no sense this week. Like, I don't see anybody in a loss doing like exceptional.
If Almeida don't take Rozenstruik in the first round, is he done for? I think that's more of, does it get to round 3, round 4, round 5? The one thing that I hate about Rozenstruik is, have a sense of urgency to start throwing some things. Yeah. I mean, the guy he does not believe in volume.
No, it's like the meme of the stick, do something, like poking him, do something, like throw something out there. I will tell you that, like, Jailton Almeida, his grappling's fantastic. His jiu-jitsu and his ground and pound is fantastic. His entry is super telegraphed, though. Now, especially the tape's out on him, he does the same entry all the time. He throws a front kick up the middle. As soon as that front kick lands behind him, he now just shoots a blast double immediately. So, like, you see American Top Team, Jairzinho Rozenstruik's representing American Top Team and been working there for some time. They're seeing the same things I am doing and seeing, and everybody out there putting film. There is a way to beat Jailton Almeida. There is a complete way. A uppercut from hell, a knee from hell, lateral movement, something. So I'm not saying that this is an absolute, like, lock play for Jailton Almeida, it's a winnable matchup. But I'm getting to Rozenstruik because I think nobody else is also.
And we'll finish on this question. Last guy in, Anthony Smith or Bryan battle, it would be Anthony Smith for me.
Yeah, same.
Plus, Anthony Smith is right now projected for lower ownership than Bryan battle, which is kind of surprising to me. But we appreciate everyone tuning in here for our UFC Charlotte preview. Of course, be sure to get in our Discord channel. Totally free to join. Great community that we have there. Myself and Pete are always in there. Pete's always throwing out some betting picks in there. Bellator, probably today. It's going on right now, actually. Is probably going to be Chalk Central. But,
One thing I kind of wanted to say to you, Jason, more than anything, is I haven't done my research for Bellator at all. Douglas Lima is an underdog.
Yeah, he's making. Well, it's not his. He's fought 185 before, but he's no longer cutting to 170.
Yeah, but he's a plus 140 underdog against Costello Van Steenis, and
Yeah.
like Costello's dangerous, but like it's Douglas Lima.
I think it's. I think part of what goes in that line is what does he look like at 185? You know, we saw it against Rory, and it just wasn't good. I think what's it look like? But I've been around Douglas. Dude is massive.
He's a monster. People don't understand.
Dude, like I'll never forget. Remember when the Bellator had the pay-per-view in Memphis?
Yeah.
So he was hurt at this point. And so we're out and about, and I see him, and I go talk to him, and like, I remember I saw one of the Bellator people. I go, how many people would say that's a 170er?
Yeah, no, exactly. Jason's a big guy. Like, y'all don't know, Jason's a tower. And for Jason to go up and be like, that dude is big. You know that Jason has a very good way of indicating who's massive for their division. And Lima is massive for welterweight, even middleweight. He's huge.
He's one of those guys, and Pete, you've seen this all the time. You go, how the hell? I'll tell you, you want to know another guy who fights today? I don't know how Brent Primus makes 155.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Brent's told me what his walk around weight is.
No, it's bad. I'm sure. I'm sure it's bad.
Yeah, Pete, when I tell you, Pete wants to fight at 55. I'll tell you what Brent walks around at. You're going to go, oh, damn.
Yeah. Well, that's probably where I'm walking around at, if I'm being honest. So,
well, dad bod life is in full effect.
Yeah, it is. It's in full effect. It is true.
But we do appreciate everyone tuning in for this episode of Fight HQ. Of course, if you watch this after the fact, leave a comment. Myself or Pete will answer your question in the comments. So I appreciate everyone tuning in for this episode of Fight HQ.